There is a place in North Texas where people go to watch birds, fish, and drive along the water. On a calm morning, the lake looks like it has always been there. Quiet, wide, unremarkable. But beneath that lake is the memory of a town. Not a legend, not a rumor, a real place called Hagerman. The town did not vanish in one night. It disappeared slowly before the water ever arrived. And to understand how a town becomes a lake, we have to go back to the beginning, to a wheat field, and a plan drawn on paper. In 1904, a man named James Patillo Smith stood in a 10-acre wheat field in Grayson County, Texas. He platted a set of streets across that field, lines on paper that would decide where people would one day walk, live, and work. He named the new town Hagerman, after a railroad attorney named James P. Hagerman. It was a small start, a field, a plan, a name, but the town grew. By 1910, Hagerman had around 250 residents. It had a cotton gin, turning the region's raw cotton into something that could be sold and shipped. It had a school, a church, a post office, and a railroad depot. It had a handful of local businesses, the kind of small storefronts that make a town feel like a town, not just a stop on a map. In the years that followed, Hagerman grew again. 3 churches served the community. A school with 3 teachers taught its children. Trains passed through on a schedule. The depot's rhythm became the town's rhythm. This was not a ghost town waiting to happen. This was a working Texas town, built by people who expected it to stay. People planted gardens, raised families, buried their dead in local cemeteries, expecting those graves to remain undisturbed for generations. No one in Hagerman, in those early years, was thinking about a lake. Hagerman sat near the Red River on the border between Texas and Oklahoma, and that river had a history of flooding. The kind of flooding that could destroy farmland, homes, and towns downstream. By the 1930s, flood control had become a national priority across much of the United States. In 1938, the federal government authorized a flood control project on the Red River. Construction began the following year in 1939. The project was called Denison Dam. It was built for flood control, for power generation, for conservation, and eventually for recreation. Behind the dam, a new lake began to take shape, Lake Texoma. It would become one of the largest reservoirs in the region, stretching across the Texas-Oklahoma border. For the engineers and planners, this was progress, a way to control the river, a way to generate power, a way to protect communities downstream from disaster. But a lake this size needs somewhere to go, and part of where it was going was directly over Hagerman. The people of Hagerman did not wake up one day to a flood. They had time, and that time was its own kind of hard. In the 1920s, word spread that the town sat in the path of a coming lake. It is one thing to lose a home in a single night. It is another thing entirely to watch it happen slowly, knowing exactly what is coming year after year. Slowly, residents and business owners began to leave. A store would close its doors for the last time. A family would load a wagon or a truck and move on. A building would sit empty, then empty a little more. There was no single dramatic moment, no fire, no storm, no single night that changed everything. Just a town quietly losing itself, piece by piece, long before the water ever reached it. Cemeteries and markers connected to the town were addressed as part of the process, a quiet effort to preserve what could be preserved. Even as the town around them emptied out, by the time construction on Denison Dam was finished in February of 1944, Hagerman was already a town in name, more than in daily life. The dam went into flood control operation in January of 1944. Lake Texoma began to fill. Hagerman did not burn. It did not explode. It did not collapse in some dramatic instant. It disappeared the way so many places disappear, by being covered. Streets that once had names went quiet under moving water. Where children once walked to school, there was only the surface of a lake reflecting the Texas sky. A wheat field had become a town, and now a town was becoming part of a lake. Today, the land and water once tied to Hagerman are part of a very different story. In 1946, the Hagerman National Wildlife Refuge was established here, an overlay of the big mineral arm of Lake Texoma. Birds move through marsh grass. Fishermen work the shoreline. Families drive along the water without a second thought. This is not a hidden underwater city. It is a historical town site, inundated by a lake that was built for flood control, power, and public use. But somewhere beneath that calm surface is the outline of streets a man drew across a wheat field in 1904. A cotton gin that once served a growing town. A depot that once brought people in, and, in the end, watched some of them leave. Lake Texoma did not just create a lake, it covered a former town. And Hagerman, Texas, became something rarer than a ruin. It became a memory, kept quietly beneath the water. The next time you see a lake in Texas, remember, some of them were not always lakes. Some of them were towns. And somewhere beneath the surface, they are still there, not as ruins, but as memory.